you're basically mechanically, you're just lifting and pulling down. So it's like a ton of shoulder, but not any sort of scap. And then when we got those bands, what are they called?
Inertia waves.
Yeah, the inertia wave bands. Then I'm sitting there like, oh, wait a minute. Now I can like actually do the shoulder thing with my scaps engaged. I was like, man, and like what you can do with it is pretty cool. And then shit, as a fighter, where you have to have tremendous pulling strength and even pulling endurance, which is, maybe we'll dig into this in the podcast, like the difference between strength, power, speed, and endurance in weird things like scapular stability, right? Everyone just usually says, oh, scap stability. Okay, cool. Well, expressing scap stability in a bench press is completely different than doing it in, 5 rounds of 5 minutes of fighting, right? Or if you're pinned down, like I don't know if you guys watched Gordon Ryan at the World Championships a couple weeks ago, and this fucking dude, I mean, he gets a rear naked choke on him, which is, I swear to you, he's just doing that to show dominance. But that guy was like fighting off a rear naked choke for like 12 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, now, granted, he had his downside arm, his left arm was pinned between the ground and Gordon's leg, but he had to like express or basically be able to maintain endurance for 12 minutes. Like I can't even imagine how hard you're working to not, against the best fighter, best no-gi mixed martial arts.
Best grappler in history.
Yeah, right. No, that's interesting. And that leads like right into a question I wanted to ask you, Rich, as far as like complexity versus simplicity of systems, right? Because we're talking about, you have your strength, power, endurance, capacity, all of these qualities in you as an athlete, period, but you also have them locally to, like we're saying, like scapular stability and even around the body. So when you're programming, when you're looking at that, how do you avoid unnecessary complexity in programming a lot of that stuff? Because I dive into rabbit holes, I know personally, too much.
Dude, this guy's got his shit together. So you basically just identified the crux, my problem. The cross that I bear is I love going into the weeds, but at the same time, as an athlete or a coach conveying a system to an athlete, it doesn't fucking matter. So you need to know the weeds, but you need to be able to explain your system in a way that's just simple and repeatable and easy. So Carl Hardwick and I did a podcast with him last week that I'll post next week, actually. And we talked about that. Like, you can go into the weeds and get all wonderful, and I can go crazy with neurology and biomechanics and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it's just giving you support for why you're doing what you're doing. But what you're actually doing with the athlete needs to be simple and complex and built on as few principles as possible. You don't want to have like 20,000 things you're doing. It just needs to be simple. And so to answer your question, I think it's great that you go down the rabbit holes so that you can kind of understand what's going on and why and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I would think, back to the scapular endurance thing, right? So when you're going to go in and program for somebody, you have to close the gap. And the gap is between whatever the demands of the sport are and whatever the athlete brings to the table. So if you're going to sit down and, hell, let's just think about mixed martial arts, because I'm sure there's a lot of fighters who listen to this. So there's a specific set, almost unique to combat sports, that you have to be able to do. Okay, you need to be able to repeatedly express power over whatever your time domain is, which might be 5 minutes, 3-minute rounds, 1 minute off, 5-minute rounds, whatever it is.
Yep.
And so you have to think about that. Okay, well, I need to be able to do that, but I also need to be able to, have continuous core engagement. I need to be able to, handle pain. There's all kinds of weird things you can do that can be either from the functional part, like, okay, you need dorsiflexion or you need good scapular stability. And then you can get into the performance realm, which is more like metabolic output, speed, power, those kind of things. And then you can even get into, in any sport, particularly combat sports, the psychological realm. It's one-on-one. There's nobody you can tag out. So if you get clocked in the face, you have to know how to control yourself. And so that's kind of the demands of the sport. Then when you come in, you think, okay, cool, this athlete does really well in these competencies and these functional things and these performance things, these psychological things. and they don't do well in this. So then now we have to close that gap. And closing the gap is like for the coach to be able to precisely figure out what they're doing, they need to be able to get into the weeds. But at the end of the day, you just need to think, okay, this athlete is lacking in scapular and stability endurance. Okay, so then I just need to be programming things that are longer time domains. Because when we're training, all we're doing is putting the athlete in an environment, the adaptation to which is what we want to happen. I want bigger muscles. Okay, you're going to do 6 to 12 reps, and average time under tension is going to be between 30 and 50 seconds. Or I want them to be really explosive. Okay, you're going to do plyometrics, right? The adaptation to those environments that you put them in training is what you want. That's the desired response. And so you just think about like, okay, here's what the sport demands. Here's what the athlete brings to the table. These are the major areas that they need work on. So I can get into the weeds and think about it. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to spend most of the time working on those things. And I don't have to go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to change this here and make this all super specific. It's just, I'm actually a bigger fan of keeping it simple, bigger movements, and consistency.
Yeah, amen.
A lot of times people go into the weeds because everybody wants a shortcut. Right. So I'm training for this thing called Sinister, which is like a famous kettlebell workout where it's 10 single arm swings every 30 seconds for 5 minutes, 1 minute rest, and then 10 Turkish get-ups in 10 minutes. Okay. Now it's with 106. Right. So if you're doing that with a 53, who cares? If you're doing that with a 106-pound kettlebell, there's all kinds of things. So I thought about this when I came in. Okay, well, what are the things that I'm limiting? Left grip strength. Right shoulder stability. Well, actually, shoulder strength, which we can talk about the difference between stability and strength later if you want. Metabolic hinge, that was weak. In the beginning, aerobically, I was down. So then I just said, okay, I need to be spending more time building my aerobic capacity. Okay, with my back injuries, I can't do 5 days a week of swinging like Strong First proposes. So I needed to use, hashtag OPEC stuff. I did a lot of what they call MAP training, which is just aerobic stuff. I'm on the bike, I'm on the rower, I'm on the ski erg, I'm on the C2 bike, working on my aerobic capacity. Okay. So I can get into the weeds with like all the specific stuff, but at the end of the day, I just have to get the work in. Right. So I just have to get the work in. So it doesn't matter how complex or nuanced it is. At the end of the day, consistency will always win. Always win. Like the greatest program in the world that you're doing for 3 weeks perfectly, and then you fall off the wagon is going to get its ass kicked by the guy that just does push, pull, hinge, squat, carry, and does that 3 to 5 days a week for months and years. That's how you do it. So to sort of tie a bow on this, the coach needs to know the weeds. The coach needs to be like you and like Austin, that loves to dig into the weeds, because then you can make better decisions about what they're doing. But then what they're doing is just, dude, get the work done. Make it simple and then just get the work done. It doesn't have to be crazy nuance. It's fun to do that. But to the athlete, they just have to get the work in. That's what I actually love about fighters. Who's the guy that was just, and I was just like, damn, he looks way more powerful on the ski erg.
Oh, Henry Corrales.
Yeah. So this dude, it's funny. Every time I go in there, I kind of train with him. And he's just a cool dude, and he can fucking push. So it's awesome sitting there watching him. And I'm looking at kind of what Austin's doing with him, and he's got him doing repeat efforts, 15 seconds on, was it 45 off?
Yeah, 15 45s.
Fucking terrible set, but for him, not for, I mean, for in terms of like performance, it's fantastic, but in terms of just doing it yourself, it's horrible. And he could just push. So he's just there getting the work in. Every time I go down to Scottsdale, he's just there. He's on the bike. He's doing circuit stuff. He's doing, the inertia wheel or whatever that thing's called. What's it called? Momentum? Inertia. No. The wheel.
Oh, the flywheel.
The flywheel, yeah, which also terrible. And it's just getting the work in. So I think it's cool to get really, really into the weeds. But at the end of the day, I think the program needs to be simple. And the coach should be able to explain everything that's in there, either to the athlete or to a 6-year-old, why you're doing what you're doing. And it doesn't have to, if you're getting into, this metabolic process, it's like, no. Way too detailed. Just, it should be very, very simple, because at the end of the day, consistency will always beat perfection, like a short-term, inconsistent, perfect workout.
Right. Well, and it's cool to see too, because exactly what you're saying about Henry, that's what makes him so special, is he just shows up and does the fucking work. Like all the guys. And yeah, exactly. And he fucking works. But all the guys I have that do very well, they're as successful as they can be. They just put their nose down, shut the fuck up, and do their work every single day. And they miss maybe 3 days an entire year just because they're on a schedule. When you get on a schedule, you're going to be more consistent. As soon as you get more consistent, you're going to be better at what you do.
Yeah, you've done a good job. I mean, when I got to train there this past or 2 Saturdays ago, just seeing your group, like you've done a good job of cultivating a group that just works. And they're all just kind of in there working on different stuff that we can maybe get in with the nasal breathing and all kinds of cool things that you've been implementing, but they just work. And it's cool. Now, one thing that I want to bring up, because I struggled with this as an athlete, and that is consistency is going to win, okay? But you can't be an idealist. So I was an idealist when I was an athlete. So the story I told myself, I still to this day think it's pretty accurate, is I was just barely talented enough to compete at the national level, right? So if you take away an amazing team that I trained with, or, you know, like one of the best coaches of all time, Judd Logan, who we lost this year, unfortunately, 4-time Olympian, broke the American record like over 20 times. I can't remember what it was. I always sort of inflate it, but I know it's at least 20. You take either of those two factors away, and then me with, you know, my little Honda Accord engine doesn't make it to the national level, period. Okay. So what I always told myself is that I have to be working harder and smarter than everyone else. Otherwise, I'm never going to get to that level. Now, I think that that's true. But one of the battles that I had, just to go in to tackle the question here, was that I wanted to get every single thing done the exact way it was supposed to be done. Okay. And it doesn't always work like that. Right. So to give you a little dive into like how crazy I was, I got done with practice late. I had night class. Judge like, okay, just cut out the last set of push press and skip the Scott curls, go to class. Cool. This is my coach. So fine, I go to class. It's a 3-hour class. I get done and I'm sitting like studying in the library and it's like 10:30 and I couldn't fucking focus. And I was like, I got to do it. I walked over to the gym. I warmed up, did 1 set of push press, 3 sets of Scott curls, went back to the library. Like I couldn't do it.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So where I struggled was I wanted every workout to be absolutely perfect, right? And I think what you need to realize is, again, back to the simplicity of things. It's like, no, you're just working on scapular stability or hinging endurance or aerobic capacity. So I get to the gym and the one assault bike that we've got at Lifetime Fitness, my buddy Ryan's on it. All right, fuck it. I'll just row. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I love that story that you shared, because I think so many athletes put themselves in that category. Like I can't tell you how many athletes I've had, myself included, that your middle school coach tells you, well, you have to work harder than everybody else to be ahead because you don't have the talent or whatever, which is an awful thing for a coach to say. But
no one ever told me that, by the way. I just told myself that.
I was told that. So maybe I'm projecting a little bit. But no, I think that's beautiful. And then the one word that keeps like sounding in my head like an alarm as you keep telling your stories, and we're talking about trusting the coach to make the informed decision, is trust, right? Because I think there's a lot of that goes around and has to in a coach-athlete relationship. That's like what Austin has when he builds his group. Guys can come in and just do the work because they know it's going to be quality work meant for them exclusively. So if you could just talk a minute on building that trust and how we can formulate a community and a group in that setting.
Yeah, that's a good line. The line that my coach Judd said to me one time. Actually, if you want me to get a little bit into the story, we're sitting there at practice, or sorry, we're at a comp. So as you would know, like rule number 1, you don't change shit the day of a comp. Like you just don't do that, right?
Yep.
So we're sitting there, and this kid comes up, and he's like, normally with the throw, you would wind. He was winding it twice and then throwing, right? That's part of the throw. I was a hammer thrower. So you wind it twice and then you do 3 spins and you throw it. And there's a thing called a sling start, which we all practice, but like if you're not doing it in your competition throws or, you know, at your high intensity throws in training, it's like not something you would ever fucking do in a meet. And he comes up and he already warmed up, took one of his throws and like, you know, wasn't doing that great. And I'm standing there and he comes over and he goes, "Hey, Judd, what do you think about if I just, sling it in there, just get after it?" And Judd's like, "Absolutely, go for it." And he walks around, I'm like, what the fuck is that? And he looks at me, and he wasn't trying to like be prolific. He just goes, it's better to believe in a bad program than not believe in a good one.
Yeah.
And he goes, that kid walked up and he goes, and I could see it in his face that he believed that that was the best thing for him to do in that moment. Now, maybe that's Judd's ability to be able to read into those people, into Eric in that moment, because he knew and he had that relationship with Eric. But for him to shut that down in that moment, I actually believe, after continuing to be trained by Judd and then coaching myself for years, that it wouldn't have been good for Eric. If he said, no, stick to the plan, Eric would walk into the ring, or in my case, well, actually in both of our cases, or the hexagon, they're going to walk in there and they're going to have doubt, right? Yeah. So there's lots of things that we can talk about with the trust thing. There's trust from the coach to the athlete. There's trust from the performance coach to the athlete, which is oftentimes different.
100%.
It's not, they blur the lines in MMA quite a bit, but like if you guys are working with golfers, well, they have a swing coach. There's a swing coach. That's a thing, right? Or if you're working with like a track athlete, they have a coach. So you are the conditioning coach, you are the strength conditioning coach, or you are the physician, right? Austin, you obviously blur those lines, which makes it better. But then there's also, you have to know who's the chief of the tribe, right? And actually, I'm going to post in a couple of weeks. I had this fantastic talk with Greg Rose, and almost the whole thing is just him spewing brilliance about where does the physician fit into the medical team. And I don't know anyone that I would ask that would know more about that. And he's the one where I got that line, like, you have to know who's in charge. Because if you walk in there and you're like, oh, hey, dude, you shouldn't be doing that. Like the coach has him doing one thing and the doctor's like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You've just fucked the athlete. You've just injected this little bit of doubt right in between their ears. And now in their training, they're not going to be able to push as hard as they need to, because they're going to wonder in the back of their head, whether they know it or not, in the back of their head, they're being going like, man, should I really be doing this? Is this hurting my hip? Is this making my shoulder worse? Or should I be doing something else? That's not good. So to stick with the first part of the trust, the person, whether it's the performance coach, whether it's the technique coach, I'm sure MMA, there's multiple technique coaches. You've got your BJJ guy, you've got your Muay Thai, you've got, wrestling or whatever. Everybody needs to get together and figure out, okay, who is ultimately in charge? And the way I think about it clinically is I always want my message to go through that person. So, I worked with Joe Kovacs for a long time, who's definitively the second best shot putter ever in history. So, there's nobody close. And he's basically competing against the Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Bruce Lee, Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong, a guy named Ryan Krauser.
The GOAT.
And Joe's very close to him, right? And so I coached elite world-class guys for several years. Like, I'm very familiar with what he does. If he said, hey, and if I had the time, if he said, hey, can you coach me? I would say, yes. He's a great guy, and I'm more than comfortable doing that. However, I'm not his coach. And so even though when I was treating him, I might have ideas, I had to go through his coach. Like, so I wrote programs for him for not like his programming, but I would write things for him, like supplementary stuff. Well, I wanted to make sure that Ashley, his coach, was actually approving what I was doing. Because if Ashley was saying one thing and then I was saying another one, it's not working to the end of making Joe as good as possible. Now, where a lot of younger coaches get in there, they want to slide in and be like the guy that says the thing that makes them great, and then that somehow, puts a little notch on their belt. But I think everyone needs to sort of check their ego and know where they fit, in the team. And then if you can get everybody working together, yeah, sure, you're not going to get the same individual credit, but remember, that's not your job. If you're actually here to help the person, you are here to do anything you can, with or without recognition, to make that athlete as good as possible, right? And so that's one aspect of the trust thing. You have to know where you fit on the team. I think what you were asking was specifically about the coach's relationship to the athlete, right? Sure. Is that what you meant?
Yep.
Yeah, so that one's tough. Like, actually, are you a coach and a physician, or are you a coach?
Nope, just strength and conditioning coach.
Don't say just. You are a strength and conditioning coach. So you are a strength and conditioning coach. So you might have. Well, I'll use Austin as an example because I kind of know what his training methodology is. So he has a different training methodology than a lot of other people. So if someone comes in and let's say that they're a top level athlete, it's a little bit more noticeable when you think of it as a top level athlete. So, Khabib wants to come back and he happens to live in Denver and he wants to train with you, right? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Beautiful. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So he's used to training a specific way.
Yep.
He's gotten to a super elite level, right? Training that way. And then he comes in and then you have some ideas. So if you instantly go after him and be like, okay, this is the way we're going to do it. Or, I guess we'll have to talk maybe about new kids because you can do that with someone younger. You can't do that with a super elite. You can't just be like, no, this is the way we do it. This is how I am, blah, 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 blah. You have to kind of work with the athlete there. And so my point with this is in the beginning, you want to make sure that you are working with the athlete and trying to figure out where they're coming from and kind of be this is a very, very simple word, but like compromising. There you go. There's a huge word in my vocabulary. Compromising. You're like, okay, well, he likes this. Okay, I don't think we need to do that quite as much, but I'm going to do that a little bit. And in the beginning, you have to just show competence and that you're going to work with them. And then they'll kind of get to know you. And then you just start like peppering in other things. And then as they gain the trust in there, you can slowly turn the battleship until he's doing exactly what you think he's doing, right? Or what you think he should be doing. With professional athletes, if you come in, when I work, on professional athletes, whether I'm at an event or they come into the office or whatever, a lot of the first couple of times, I'm just doing what I'm told. Like literally, that sounds horrible, but I'm just doing what I'm told. Like if you work on a pro golfer at a tournament, they know like, hey, I need you to hit ART on my left adductor. Can you do a right rotation adjustment and just loosen my hips up? Yep, sure. Now, if I went in there, no, you don't need that. Like, like tightness is, a sign of dysfunction. So let's go after some like reflex locomotion, some DNS shit. They're going to walk. They're going to walk. 100%. So you have to establish that trust. And in the beginning, that trust, you kind of have to compromise a little bit and do sort of what they're expecting. And then you can slowly interject your methodology. And then they start to trust you, and then they see, ooh, you understand the weeds. You have a bigger picture of what you're doing, and then they'll kind of trust you more to do that. That might take 2 years.
Yeah, and it speaks to what you were saying earlier. I forget the exact quoting that you used, but I learned it as psychology beats physiology, right?
Sure.
So, and I learned it in a college football weight room where we're coming in, and bands or chains, right? We're doing accommodating resistance, whatever. The group of
bands are by far my favorite, but go ahead.
Right. But if
they both work, but bands are like my favorite thing ever.
But you come into a college football weight room, and what are the guys going to get hyped about doing and be way more in for? Is the chains, right? So
because they're cool looking. Yeah, they're cooler looking.
They sound loud, and so you might get a lot more effort. You might get a lot more return out of that in a college football setting versus the bands, which may, like you said, be a better stimulus textbook wise.
Yeah, that's kind of the psychology always beats physiology. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Another good way to think about it. I was debating with somebody the other day, and we were talking about over coddling, our youth athletes, right? Yeah. So I do not want to get into that whole thing, but it's transcending the mentality from the 70s. Like think of the Bobby Knights, just screaming at people and like having them do practice and like, you can't have any fucking water, for 2 days in football. And it's just like, the fuck are you, like, what? Like, what are you doing? So that's too extreme in one direction.
Yep.
But then there's the other direction where like, okay, you can't over coddle them either. So it's like finding the balance here. Right. And so somebody was saying like, oh, you shouldn't, like, why would you have a rule that you can't have your hands on your knees? Okay. Well, that's like, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember that, but I would practice and they'd be like, dude, don't, it's like, I call it George Foreman rest. You just know George Foreman never sat down. Mm-hmm. Right? So to me, I'm oftentimes doing George Foreman rest between my workouts. Like I can't sit down and, and one of the rating systems I have for metabolic conditioning is a 1 is you're just moving. You don't feel any need to rest. A 2 is you want to put your hands on your knees, but you can resist it. A 3 is you have to put your hands on your knees. A 4 is you have to put a third point of contact on the ground, be it a knee or a hand. And a 5 is you're just laying on the ground, right? That's the rating system for me, right? So if you're wondering, Austin, as I go up in weight with my bells, I have to be able to do the workout and have it be a 2 before I'm metabolically and physiologically ready to move up to the next more challenging thing. That's how I think about it, right? So that's an easy way to go. But anyways, so the question is like, well, you recover faster if you put your hands on your knees, right? And then, okay, that's true. So physiologically, you should tell them to put their hands on their knees. They're still mostly vertical, so you're not going to completely mess up, blood flow and all that kind of stuff. And they recover faster because you don't have to stabilize as hard. So then you can just focus on respiration. Cool. But there's a humongous benefit to teaching the athlete to push, right? There's a pain part of it. There's a psychological part of it that cannot be, the importance of which can't be understated. So I think like knowing like, okay, the athlete feel like perfect example with me with throwers, bench press, it's fucking retarded. It's just bad for your shoulders. I would much rather teach an athlete to do, jerks and heavy push presses off of blocks and all that kind of stuff. I've got all the, again, in the weeds arguments for why it's vastly superior to the bench press. And yet if I'm working with a world-class shot putter, we're fucking benching. Like that's like, I don't even compromise. I'm not even going to like try to get it in their head. Like, hey, dude, I mean, do you really want your scaps locked into position and then you're keeping your wrist in a closed chain position? You can't rotate. I mean, that's like weeds. And they're like, dude, I need to bench. Like so-and-so benches 600 pounds. I need to bench more than 600 pounds. That's the story they tell themselves. So bench, just put it in the program. And that's what's kind of like fun about what you guys do is there's a humongous art behind the science. It's easy to like, I mean, I could hand over like, the best programs I've ever written my entire life. But if you give them to a coach that's just going to do them as is, they're not going to be nearly as effective. Like I watch Austin all the time going like, oh, no, do this, switch over to this or go to this. And he's like like on the fly changing things. Because every time an athlete walks in the gym, they're different. And so knowing, okay, do I have to placate towards the psychology today or towards the physiology? Which one's more important? And that's the art of it. There's no straight line that you can draw that says, okay, here's when you would do this, there's when you would do that.
Well, and that kind of plays too. It's so important to build actual relationships with your athletes because like that's kind of why it works for me is because I hang out with my athletes. I'm with them all the time. Like I get to know them on a personal level. So I know like when you came through last weekend, Rich, Vanessa, she fought yesterday. She won yesterday.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
You could tell she was interesting. Like, she has the, just all the way down to her bones. You can tell that she just knows how to, I don't know. I was just looking at it. I was like, yeah, that's a fighter.
Exactly. But like, so she's normally this happy, lucky, like that she's the bubbly person in the room. She's the one that everybody's around.
Oh, was she more intense just because the fight was coming up?
Exactly. So
now, mind you, for people that weren't there, obviously, it was a quiet intensity. She wasn't like walking around like huffing and puffing. She was just kind of like, I don't know. It was awesome. She was just mentally preparing for the fight.
But like, so our work was supposed to be nasal breathing through this. I was going to walk her through different workouts. And then when she walked in, I was just like, hey, something seems a little bit more intense right now. It seems like you're in a zone and you just want to get work in. We were doing nasal breathing, which we can talk about next. Cause I know I would like to talk to you about nasal breathing.
I wish I had more science to back it up, but I am fully committed to this. This is valuable stuff. But go ahead, finish your statement. So nasal breathing, double unders.
Yeah, so she threw the tape on her mouth to promote some nasal breathing, and she just went into it. Didn't say one word to her for 35 minutes. She just did an entire mobility work, and then right onto the bike. And she just did all of her work. I think I talked to her 2 times. Normally, we would just be chatting the entire time, bouncing in and out. As soon as she's done with her mobility warm up, she hops on the bike. That's not nasal breathing, but because she's just more intense and she seems like just different than normal. Boom. Just jump into the intense work, do your thing. I ain't going to talk to you. I'm not going to bug you today.
Hell yeah.
So that's you knowing the athlete, right? So that goes back to knowing the athlete. And so I guess that's another benefit of developing a relationship with them. They can come in and you can see, like there might be times when you start pushing somebody and they get 3 sets, into a 20 set thing. You're like, get the fuck out of here.
Yep.
Go home.
Yep.
And like, in your head, you're like, no, I got to get this working. No, go away. You're fine.
Funny enough, I did that with Henry yesterday. Henry just showed up. He did. Have you heard of Fossil Creek in Arizona at all? It's a hike. There's like, so it's a huge hike in Arizona, 22-mile hike, but you jump in. Yeah. So he did Fossil Creek a day and a half ago, walks in. He's like, I feel good. And he starts moving. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck?
You look like shit.
No, you don't.
So then I told him, I'm like, hey, dude, like, let's just cut it. Let's just do treatment today. It's not a big deal. You're the only one here. And he's like, no, I got to push. And I'm like, Henry, you just almost hiked a fucking marathon, bro. Let's recover.
Yeah, we have to talk about, well, I would like to talk about this. I think that's the better way to say it. I would like to talk about establishing readiness for training. Not now. Sure. We can do the nasal breathing now, but that's like one thing that I've kind of gotten interested in, because we just said the art and science. Like, you read that girl, I can't remember her name, the fighter, Vanessa. She needed to just come in, do the intense stuff, and then go home. So there's no other fluff on top of that. You had Henry come in, and you're just like, no, you're not ready. Get out of here. So there's a bunch of ways. I did a podcast on the subjective and objective ways that you can kind of measure those. None of them are perfect. It has to be this sort of like collection of a battery of tests that I'd love to chat about, because that is how you dial in the dose, right? The prescription is, what are you doing? Okay, Vanessa, you're doing nasal breathing and double unders. The dose is, you're going to do 5 rounds of 3 minutes and 1 minute rest. Or you're going to do 10, no one's doing 10 minutes of double unders, but well, actually, unless you're in a jump rope core, but you know what I mean? Like, okay, you're doing squats and this and this and this. That's the dose. The dose is as important as the prescription, right? And so I think that now that I've been able to just been in the sport or in the space longer, I'm much more aware of objective and subjective ways to establish readiness. And so I feel like if I could go back and do it again, or like get into just strength training, I would be so much better about dosing, microdosing, if you will, microdosing or micromodulation of the dose real time in the middle of their workout. Because I did kind of what, I'm not saying you're doing this, we can talk about what you're taking measurements on later on, but I'm watching you and you're just saying, okay, switch over and do this, or go to this, or oh, no, cut it off, you're done. And you're doing exactly what any good coach would do, which is like, you're reading that athlete, and I'm perhaps projecting here, but you might be just sort of like basing a lot of that on the relationship that you've built with that athlete. So like in their eyes, in their posture, if they're pushing too hard or if they're not pushing hard enough. And then there's maybe some other things that we can get into. I'll just throw that out there if you guys want to talk about that.
Let's jump in. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because I use this a lot. So I have different athletes use different things. All UFC athletes have access to an Oura Ring. They get it for free. So I get access, like for Vanessa, for this same example, I knew her Oura Ring score, her sleep score before she walked in. I check that every morning. And then she also uses something called First Beat, which is a new wearable. I think they're out of Switzerland, but I really like First Beat Sports.
So help me out here. So is First Beat something you just put on?
So she does a morning. Yeah. So it's a heart strap.
It's like Morpheus, where you just put it on and you just get you take it and you take your HRV, you get your body temp if it'll pick it up.
Yep. So it's essentially, it'll be body temp, it'll be HRV, and then it's also your wearable. So it's your workout tracker as well. So it's just like a polar strap mixed with an Omega Wave, if you will.
Sure.
It's kind of what they're trying to sell. But so with that, I know her acute workload, her chronic workload, and essentially every metric I could ask for all in one thing. So when she walked in on Saturday, I knew she was not as recovered as she should be. And then on top of that, I also saw the intensity in her eyes where she's like, I just want to get the fucking work in. So those two things combined, I'm like, hey, let's chill. With Henry, for example, that was more of a relationship type thing, because he showed up and he uses a polar watch for his wearable, for his metric tracking.
I just got a new Garmin. I just switched to that. I mean, I've got the Morpheus.
See, I want to try Morpheus. I've heard really good things about it.
We can finish your statement, then I can talk about Morpheus.
Yeah. But so Henry walked in, he showed up he actually had a 92% recovery rate. He was in the green. He had great sleep, but just something wasn't right. It didn't seem like it just didn't seem like the same movement quality that he normally has. So that's where I think the relationship, in my mind at least, kind of has to trump everything, where even if it says he's green, if the movement quality isn't there, if the intensity isn't there, if something is off, that's when I need to make an adjustment as a coach and as somebody that also not just trains the athlete, but cares about the athlete, or I might be putting him at too big of a deficit if I keep pushing him harder, and I don't know if he's going to recover in a quick enough time.
Yeah, so two things about that. One, in the beginning, when you're less experienced, you have to depend on the objective measurables
Yep.
because you just don't know, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then as you get better and more experience, like you have, as you develop a better relationship, with the athlete, where you can read their body language, right? It's very similar to, like, do you have a dog by any chance?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. You can read your dog's, if your dog is happy, sad, excited, whatever, sick, all by these subtle they can't talk to you, but you can figure it out. So that same kind of thing is happening in, subconsciously when you're watching Henry, warm up, come in, say hi, how he gets on the table, everything. You can just sort of see it. So as you develop the relationship with the athlete, you can get more and more accurate. So I almost feel like you can kind of be less dependent on the objective measurables, right? Morning temperature, heart rate, HRV. We can talk about the reliability of those things in a second. And then you can use your subjective because you're better at it. You have a better relationship. The other thing that, I think it's comical, like what all those systems sell is the idea where you're going to get up in the morning and you're going to go look and be like, oh, cool. It says I can train intense today. Great. Or you get up and it's like, ooh, it tells me, like, mine told me to rest. And I was just like, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm not rest. Like,
Yeah.
So to me, I would love it. HRV, right? I love the concept behind HRV because it's tapping into this deep neurology, right? The autonomic nervous system, right? So for those of you that don't know, you've heard HRV, I'm sure, but HRV is basically a measurement of the variability, micro variability between heart rates, and you want it to be more variable because that's showing that the heart and the brain is responding to the hundreds, if not thousands of millions of input, right? Subconscious, subcortical, autonomic input into the system, and then the heart rate will change. The space between the beats changes microscopically. When you have a low number, that means that you're more stressed, and the sympathetic nervous system is just suppressing all of that and then holding the heart rate very consistent. That is incredible, right? To the best of my knowledge, it was invented to measure pilot stress levels back in the 50s. Amazing. The problem is I've tried Aura, Morpheus, and now Garmin, and I know the Apple Watch has one, and they're all vastly different. They're vastly different. And I'm just like, it's a measurement. Like, you can't, it would be like a scale measuring my weight. One tells me I weigh 226, one tells me I weigh 205, one tells me I weigh 315. It's like, what is going on? So I get frustrated with them because they're very imprecise, right? So I think that they are no different than like a compass. It just tells you, like, okay, that's north is that way. Okay, you're facing that direction. Cool. So it's a great measurement that you can put on top of other things. Morning temperature is way more accurate. And I don't mean temperature off your wrist. I used to take axilla temperature. It's more accurate, right? So you wake up in the morning, you get your heart rate. Morning heart rate, objective, consistent, reliable data. Morning body temperature, objective, consistent, right? You get those two. Those are way more valuable and consistent than HRV. HRV is all over the board, right? Now, I like having HRV. I love my sleep score, but I would bet at the top end, they're 60% accurate at the top end. I've gotten out of bed before and I look at my Oura ring and it's like, trouble falling asleep last night. And I was like, no, it's fucking out cold in 3 seconds. What are you talking about? And it told me that I took 2 hours to fall asleep. And I'm like, I looked at my wife and I was like, she's like, yeah, you were like totally out cold in like 30 seconds. I was like, great. So
Sick.
I think that they're valuable, but we can't lean on them and say, oh, no, Henry, you came in, well, you did it. He came in and his recovery was good. His sleep score was good. And you're like, yeah, that's not right. So then you just depend on your wisdom and the knowledge that you've developed.
Yeah.
So to me, they're trends that you want to follow, right? So if you're watching, I don't really care what your HRV is today. I care what your average HRV is over the last 60 days. Or we just switched over, we're doing a 3-week program. And at the end of that program, your HRV just kept going down and down and down and down and down. Your morning heart rate kept going up and up and up and up and up. Your morning temperature kept going up and up and up and up and up. If it's doing that, then you can kind of see a trend. It's like, ooh, I need to maybe throw in, a little bit of recovery in here to get them back into, what I call the yellow zone, which is the training load, volume times intensity divided by time, that's stimulating an adaptation to which they can recover from, right? The red zone, you're pushing them hard. You have to do that sometimes. You might be doing this in your fight camps. In the beginning of it, you're pushing them hard, and then you drop down into the green zone so that they can recover and go into the fight and kick ass. But you might use the trends of those 3 objective measures we're talking about: morning heart rate, morning temperature, morning HRV, and you're just saying, like, okay, I'm just going to follow that. But the idea that you would be like, oh man, my HRV, it dropped 10 points today, I can't train hard today. That is not how it fucking works. That's just not how it works. Like, you just can't do that. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're talking about modulating it both based on objective measures and in your feel. I think athletes intuitively do it on their feel all the time. How hard are you going to train in practice? And they may do it subconsciously or not, but you talked about Gordon Ryan earlier, and like, he's notorious training every day, right? That's what he does. He trains every day. He just modifies his effort or intensity level depending on what his RPE is or what his auto-regulated state is. Now, I would argue that takes a ton of skill as an athlete, and you're never really going to get an accurate picture of that.
But I don't know if I'd call it skill. He's probably gifted in feeling his body and knowing. Some athletes are very, very aware of like what they can do and what they can't, and some are not. And then the longer you train, the better you're able to sort of auto-regulate. I like that term, auto-regulate the micro intensity of every rep, literally every rep. Like, it's not just like, oh, okay, you're doing squats and you're doing, sets of 5 at 80% with 3 minutes rest in between. It's how hard are you working with each one of those reps. And really good athletes, I did another podcast on this. I called it landing the plane, because the coach can prescribe something, right? The tower can get the plane lined up. Right, the autopilot can get the plane in the neighborhood of the airport. Then the tower lines you up. Then the pilot has to grab the controls and land the plane. So the coach can help them with the dosing and the prescription. But at the end of the day, the micro intensity of what they're doing with every rep, every rolling session, whatever they're doing, the athlete has to be able to do that. And if they do it really well, they're going to stimulate a better response without getting, well, they could still get injured, but like, they're less likely to get injured.
Right.
And so that's the cool thing. Now, here's an interesting question that's been bouncing around in my head. If you're dosing correctly and the athlete is auto-regulating well, is there a need for recovery time? Like rest weeks, like down weeks. I don't mean like you obviously need to sleep well and nutrition well and all those things.
Right,
but
like a deload.
Do you need is there such a thing as a deload if you're dosing correctly? So think about Gordon Ryan.
Yeah.
He's probably not doing a lot of deloads because he knows exactly how hard he can be training. So what do you think?
Well, I think, yeah, because even when we're auto-regulating and everything's going well in camp, we still have to have periods of high stress to, quote unquote, to overload the system, right? We have to have those periods of high stress, and then we have to come down off of that to stimulate enough change. Is kind of what I would think is the classical strength and conditioning periodization model.
Yes, for sure.
Right? So,
well, what I would say is like that's you can do that, and really we can fight over the nuance of this, but at the end of the day, you're going to do it with some athletes and not with others. But you can also, instead of so think about this: the harder into the red zone you go, the longer you're in the red zone, the more time you're going to have to spend in the green zone.
mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So instead of just throttling yourself into the red zone for 3 weeks or 6 weeks and then dropping into the green zone for a week and then throttling it and then dropping it, why wouldn't you just go up and down in and out of the yellow zone and the top end of the green zone. So you can do it like, instead of doing like this, like you come up, then you rest, you come up, then you rest. It's just this the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, but so what you're
ahead.
saying right there, that's why I wanted to bring it up earlier, and it's cool we came back to it. I think dose is more important than prescription.
Yeah.
In my
Oh,
mind.
I totally agree. Because this goes back to like what we started with, which is like the complexity. So no, you're just pushing.
Yeah.
And we just need you to improve your metabolic capacity to hinge in a 5-minute period.
Yeah.
So it doesn't like, okay, we can do all kinds of hinges. We could name 100 different kinds of hinges, but I do agree with you that the actual dose is more important than the prescription.
Right.
Yeah,
But
like
in most cases, a lot of people don't see it like that. They think about the minutia, they think about the complexity, when in reality, if we dose everything correctly, we don't need deloads. And talking about Gordon, I think what those types of athletes do well is they don't necessarily take deloads. They just increase their movement variability and train a new skill. So
well, that's another thing that goes into that. If you have high movement variability, then you're less likely to sort of beat up any one given tissue. Exactly. And so then you're not going to need the deload as much.
Yeah.
I think that the answer is some athletes are going to need to go through periods where you got to kick their ass and really, really push them. You guys probably aren't doing heavy squat cycles or things like that, but you could just do like, I just call it engine block work, where you're just trying to make their engine bigger. So, structural work. So you're getting them in there and you're like, hey, dude, you need to gain 7 pounds of mass. Okay. So you got to work to do that. And if you do that, then like pushing in and recovery is a good way to do that. But I also think that one that's less popular, I think it's because it's harder to dose, is, just like micro managing the intensity.
Right. Well, it's because people don't understand a lot of people don't understand the concept of minimal effective dosing. They're either all on or they're all off.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's it just doesn't make any sense to an athlete.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to an athlete.
Actually,
that goes back to go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't even know if we've described that, and I think you do a really good job, Rich. Can you talk about minimal effective dosing a little bit?
Yeah, that goes back to my tachometer analogy. So you have, the green zone that's where you're recovering, and if you stay in that green zone, that's the training load, volume times intensity divided by time. If you stay in that green zone, you're going to recover, and to be honest with you, you'll actually decondition there a little bit. So we need to go into that. If the athlete's injured or whatever, or you're going into a comp, you want to make sure that they're fresh and sharp and ready to go. The yellow zone is kind of where you want to spend most of your time, and that's where you're stimulating an adaptation, but they can actually recover from it, right? And then the red zone is the stimulus is stronger, but the longer you're in the red zone, the farther into the red zone you are, the more likely you are to get injured, right? That's kind of the three things. So the dose, the minimum effective dose, is where you are basically prescribing sets, reps, tonnage, tempo, intensity, whatever you want to measure it with. You're going to dose it in a way that gets the desired adaptation without doing more than you need to, right?
Yeah.
And the reason more than you need to is a bad thing in some cases is there's some untowarded effects that come from that. So you're like, okay, we're going to do 10 sets of squats instead of 7. Okay, cool. So then you do that, and yeah, sure, it might work on the squat, might not be that bad, but then you're going to have HRV will go down, body temperature will go up, sleep will start getting a little bit beat up. Then you're going to have cortisol levels are going to rise, testosterone levels are going to drop, and you have all of these, long-term metabolic responses, endocrine responses to the training. Basically, what we're describing is you're slowly moving towards overtraining, right? And overtraining is a continuum. It's not a diagnosis. It's like rhabdo. Like you can have rhabdo and not have Coca-Cola colored pee. Like it doesn't. Like you can have rhabdo. And people don't realize that. No. I had rhabdo. I didn't. No. You can I've unfortunately had rhabdo before, but it wasn't so bad that I had to go to the hospital. Such is the case with overtraining. And so, if you do more than necessary, then that's going to push them farther in the red zone, push them faster towards overtraining. And then you're going to have to hit the emergency brake and do a rest week, right? Or a rest period, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, whatever, depending on how how far into this process are you figuring out like, oh shit, they're working way too hard. Like they're losing their appetites. Their sex drive is dropping, right? They're not sleeping very well. All these weird things that start to happen. Their nails are getting thin. I mean, like all kinds of crazy things that happen. So the dose matters because you want the desired adaptation, but at the end of the day, we want them as healthy as possible for when they go to battle, which is not an analogy with you guys. It is with me.
Yeah. No, but I think that that's hugely important to understand and recognize, especially in the MMA population. Like, I feel like so much of my MMA athletes live in the doing more than necessary category, right? That's, the training culture of the sport. But I also think that by doing that work, they've built up such a capacity to handle it, right? Like their capacities through the roof and they can handle it, but it's still not optimal for performance. You're, in that sense, training to be a better trainer. You're not training to perform in my
I mean, it also goes back to, so you had asked about how do you establish trust with an athlete, and we answered that, but now we can answer like, well, why is this so important? So one of the things that anytime that I remember every time I worked with an athlete, they would go through and do the programming, and after the first program, they would inevitably tell me, I mean, to the best of my memory, 100% of the time, they would say, I'm not doing enough. Every single time. They're like, dude, I'm not doing enough. Like, just leave it alone. Like, I'm training power athletes, so we're not doing metabolic stuff or whatever like that. So it's not like I'm, just putting them out on the floor with training. But it's like, high dynamic stuff or bands or, ballistic work mixed in with other like weird stuff. And so they get done. And I always think about the nervous system, right? So to me, the endocrine system is dumb. Not dumb meaning like it doesn't require specificity to effectively train it. The muscular system, same way. The nervous system requires high levels of specificity, and it changes instantaneously. So because the adaptation is so fast in the nervous system, if you want to dial that in, you have to basically be programming everything as for the nervous system, and then the other ones, it's just get working. Right. So you're just thinking like, okay, I need to get their metabolic endurance better. Okay. Well, we'll just get on the bike, get on the assault, get on the rower, get on the skier, just get your work done. And in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you're going to be better. Yeah. The nervous system, if you did the same movement for 8 weeks, your nervous system would get flat. So it loves change, right? So it loves change. So to me, I'm always thinking about like the nervous system so that I can sort of micro change that, right? Cool. So with the athlete though, when they come in and I'm making changes or things like this, and I'm thinking like long-term, the math doesn't work for them to say, no, you only need 5 sets, not 7, right? The athlete, any athlete that's worth their weight in carrots can basically just go in and they want to push super hard. So it doesn't make any sense that they would ever walk out of the gym without tremendous fatigue. This is why CrossFit worked. It was so popular, right? So the coach's relationship with them is so valuable there because the coach can say, no, you need to be doing this. And if they trust you and you've established a good relationship with that athlete, then they will actually go, okay, I've bought into this program, right? Better to believe in a bad program than not believe in a good one. So what we're trying to get is the ideal situation where they're believing in a good program. And so the trust thing, the psychology thing, all matters so that you can dose the athlete correctly.
Yeah.
Right. It's all hinged on that because every athlete that walks into the door, like to give you a really good analogy with an athlete you've probably never worked with, distance runners, right? So distance runners kind of come literally it's usually their junior year in college when they finally figure out like, hey dude, when I say just go out and just get, just garbage miles, just run easy, you don't have to run like fucking 6 flat miles, run 7:30s, 8 flat miles. I don't care. And they don't get it because every time they step on the track or get on the road, they want to go. And it's like, no. This is just volume work, right? So I don't know if you guys do a lot of carries and sled pushes and pulls, but if I were training MMA people or combat sports, I would do a shit ton of that. But that's just like it's just dosing. It's like, I don't know, just grab the sandbag and just go walk for 20 minutes. I'll see you in a second. I'll see you when you get back. Like, it's just, you're just getting working, right? It's just getting
100%.
working over time. Again, back to the simplicity thing, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to get into the nuance of just, I don't know, just pick a fucking bag, carry it, and then when you get tired, put it down and rest and pick it back up and walk longer. Do that for 20 minutes. So we don't have to like, oh, no, I want you to hold here and make sure that the elbow's like this and the scaps can get, no, fuck it. Just put the thing in your shoulder and go. Like, that's pretty simple. But that athlete has to sort of trust you to know that, like, okay, we don't need to do more than this. And I just need to like trust this guy, play the long game, and just get the work in.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that happens in a lot of MMA. And like, it's funny that you mentioned like your distance runner junior year of college is kind of when they hit that crossover where they understand the training load. For a lot of MMA athletes, I think it's like when they finally get a big paycheck, then they have the confidence and less of the scarcity mindset where they're like, all right, now I can start to
that's a good one. I've
quality
never
versus the
what would be the analogy? So for distance runners, they figure it out because they either are not getting better or they're breaking. One of the two, right? So when you're just doing like, okay, so when I'm thinking about programming, I break it up into primary, secondary, and tertiary movements. Primaries are like your big ones, like your squats, cleans, snatches, all that kind of stuff. Secondaries are sort of like kind of like that, but not quite as important. Tertiaries are going to be just work. So hypertrophy stuff, functional capacity shit, working on functional competence like dorsiflexion, hip mobility, whatever. And so when I used to think, like, this is how ridiculous I am. I used to measure on all of my programs the ratio between time under tension and rest time. So I would know, okay, my muscles were under contraction for 32 minutes and 44 seconds, and I was resting for only 15 minutes and 28 seconds, or I was resting for 1 hour and 14 minutes, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stupid, right? That goes way back to what you said before, like getting too far in the weeds. Totally unproductive, right?
Yeah.
Cool to go through. Glad as a coach and an educator that I did it. Totally worthless for an athlete, like on every single level. So I would go through and like figure that out. Well, now I'm that picky with the primaries. 1, 2, maybe 3 movements. Not really. Usually it's 2. And I'm hyper specific about the dosing, like Austin was mentioning, of those. And the farther down the program they get, the less I care, right? So and this is where like CrossFit has influenced me a ton. So now in some of my secondary and tertiary stuff, I'm not thinking like, okay, we're going to do, I need to work on some posterior chain stuff, right? So, okay, cool. I used to go, okay, we're going to do some RDLs. And it's going to be 3-0-3 tempo. We're going to do a chain on there. And I want to do, cool. And you can do that. I can give them a tempo. But now I might just be like, okay, you're going to do 3-0-3. So 6 seconds. If I was going to do it for 10, like that's a lot, 60 seconds. So now I'm just going, fuck it. Like if it's going to be in a tertiary movement, I'm not putting a tempo on it. I'm just like, unless I need to slow them down, like stop the bell at the top or something. Then I'm just going to be like, all right, you're just going to do 5 rounds of 15 RDLs or 15 kettlebell swings, start, or maybe do some double unders. Let's get some heart rate going in there. And then we're going to do just some kettlebell swings and then some sandbag lunges, just CrossFit programming. So just do, you're doing 50 double unders, you're doing 15 swings, and you're doing 10 alternating lunges with a sandbag. And you're just going to go through that 5 times. Just move through it. What's the rest time? I don't fucking care. Just move through it. Just make sure that you're just, staying in, effort level. You're staying in that zone 2, zone 3 thing, like my measurement that I gave you before. Sure. I just don't care as much, right? I just want it to be, just get the work in. Just get the volume work in. So with the runners, what they do is by throttling yourself on your recovery days or your off days, or for them, they're just kind of getting their mileage in, you actually hinder your ability to get after the important workouts, right? Your interval training, your just any aerobic capacity stuff, your speed work, right? There's a thing called threshold training where you're running at the exact pace where you're aerobically clearing what you're lactically producing. The less effectively you're recovering on your other days, the less intensely you can tackle the important workouts. So if you're throttling yourself on your recovery days, and then you come in and you guys are like, hey guys, we got to go after, I don't know how much metabolic conditioning stuff you're doing, but if you're going to be like, okay, we're going to do, I just love sandbags, so I'm just going to keep talking about it. We're going to do, double unders, sandbag cleans, and the assault bike, right? Heavy sandbag cleans, right? And you're just going to do this, and we're going to do 2 minutes on, 3 minutes off. Okay. So now you got 2 minutes work, 3 minutes. You can fucking throttle yourself in that 2 minutes. I need them to do that. So in order to do that, they have to be in a place psychologically and physiologically where they can push so that they can dose themselves appropriately. Well, if they're killing themselves in their recovery days because they're hitting the assault, like let's say like Austin, you just give them like, okay, I just come in and just hit 10,000 meters on the rower easy. And they're in there like trying to pull a 150 for 10,000 meters. And they come in the next day, they can't hit the workout that you actually care about hard enough. You don't give a shit about the row. You're just saying, keep the blood flowing, keep it moving, just volume work, man, just get it in. Or if they're going to do a carry, like, okay, because we're going to push into the nasal breathing here. All right, I want you to get a 20-minute carry, nasal breathing every 2 minutes. You're just going to grab the sandbag. You're going to do 5 cleans and then keep walking with the bag on the other shoulder. Well, if they came in and instead of using like a 40, because you don't care, they're like, okay, I'm going to go after him, use a 100-pound bag today. Cool. So then they do that, they throttle themselves, and then they get into like their Monday smash it metabolic conditioning, getting ready for, actually having the capacity to be able to fight, in whatever rounds they're doing. Well, then they're tired and they can't push it. That's the equivalent of the distance runner going out and like crushing 6 flat, miles when they should be running 8 flat miles. So I guess to tie a bow on it, it's you have to think, okay, 1 or 2 workouts a week, maybe 3 if you're just crushing them. That's definitely red zone shit. Those are the focuses. Everything else is accessory to that. So everything else you're doing, whether you're working out or recovering, is designed to make those events better. So if you're pushing too hard on your off days, you're going to hinder your ability to hit those hard, right? So that's why that's so important.
Well, I think it's important to draw a parallel before we get into nasal breathing that this exact thing happens in every single fight camp because people are trying to drop weight. If we're dropping weight, they feel like they need to run more and they need to run more intensely. When I prescribe a zone 2 running to them and an athlete decides to go, oh, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to sprint today. And that puts them
zone 2. You're like, this is worthless.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Everybody wants to
tell them, hey, just go run for 45 minutes at zone 2. You should be able to do that. And then they go and they instead do fucking interval sprints or some shit like that. And then they're at a deficit for their number one thing in camp is fucking sparring. You need to be able to perform on your sparring days to implement your game plan. But if you go and run at that interval sprints when it's supposed to be zone 2 and more restorative running, guess what? You're going to be at a deficit when you have to go do your actual fucking job.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, again, trust in your programming and your execution as well. But and one little aside, very small, I don't think we need to get into the weeds on this one, but a lot of what you're talking about, Rich, sounds like a Charlie Francis high-low model. Is that influence there at all?
No, I'm not super familiar with that. So no, I mean, I'm sure he thought of it before I did, but
no. Yeah.
I love it when people are like, "Oh yeah, I invented this." No, you didn't. You saw this somewhere, and someone influenced you, and it's just like pump the brakes on how you invented this. No, so you're talking about like back to the pushing hard, a couple days a week, and then recovering.
Yeah.
So there's 2 broad ways, and I don't know where these came from. You have the mentality. This actually goes back into the do you need a recovery weeks? But this is we're talking about the microcycle of just a week, right? So you can do, let's just talk about squatting. So you're like, okay, I'm going to squat. You could squat once a week. You could squat twice a week. Or if you wanted, you could squat 3, and I've actually done programs where I'm squatting 5 days a week. Well, the more frequently you're doing it, the higher the total volume or total tonnage, depending on how you're measuring it, the less intensely anything could be. Here's another dumb thing that I used to measure. I would take my squats and also all of my movements, okay? So I would count my total reps in the month or the program, and then I would calculate the total tonnage moved, and I would divide the reps into the tonnage. So it's a measurement of intensity. What was my average rep squat in that 6-week period?
Yep.
Okay.
I did that.
So it's a cool number. Again, too far into the weeds, totally fucking worthless. Don't do it with your athletes. But if I'm doing a program, like I used to do this with the runners, what is their average mile they're running? So when they're just in the off season and they're just doing zone 2 heart rate shit, let's say that you take a 4 flat miler and their average mile, all of their miles, their warm-up miles, their workout miles, everything, because they're not doing a lot of workouts, they're not doing a lot of speed work. You take their average mile, right? And that's including if they're doing 200-meter intervals or 400-meter intervals. That counts. That all counts, right? So there's a lot of math in here, but you say, okay, they're in the off season, they're just getting volume in, and then they're doing their average mile, 4 flat miler, their average mile is like 7:30. That means that they're just getting tons of volume in. But then as they get closer to competition, that average mile might drop down to like 5:40, 5:30, because they're spending more of their time hitting the intensity, right? So with the Charlie Francis one, I think what he's saying or what you're saying is like you can have, we're going to hit my Mondays and Thursdays, I'm going to hit squats really hard, and then I'm going to recover really hard. And you can and should do that, right? That's going into the red zone on Monday, coming out of the red zone, going back into the green zone on Tuesday and Wednesday, into the red zone, back down, right? You can also just do mass like tonnage work where you're okay, 5 days a week, you're going to come in, we're going to do some squats. I used to do the same squat. I would change the squat motion a little bit. Back to Austin's idea, instead of worrying about the prescription, I would do the dose. So like I would just change the movement that I'm doing, because this is volume work. I'm just trying to get big. I'm just trying to get massive. And so like, you might just alternate, like, okay, one day you're doing barbell back squats. The next day you're doing front squats. And then the third day you're doing sandbag squats on a single shoulder. Okay.
Yeah,
and you're just doing,
yeah.
you're just going to come in and you're just getting 3 sets of 15 and then you're done. Like, so you can't do 10 sets if you're doing that every day, right? So there's an inverse relationship between volume and intensity, but there is value to doing that one, right? So I tend to spend more time with my athletes doing like the, higher intensity days and then lower intensity days. But there's absolutely times I wouldn't do 5 days of squats anymore, or 6 days of squats, actually what we're doing. But there's times when I might do 3 days a week where I'm just having them just get work in, but it's much, much smaller volume. The dose is smaller, but it's basically the consistency over time, right? So go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, that's how you're staying in like the high yellows versus going out to the reds. Is that correct?
We're always trying. So with the Charlie, with the, what was it called? The high intensity?
Yeah, it's high-low method is how I learned
High-low
it.
method, sure. So with the high-low method, the average of the week needs to be in the yellow zone. But then within the workout, you're going to go more into the red zone. Now, you would have with both of them, let's just call the high-low method and the tonnage method, right? So with the tonnage method and the high-low method, you theoretically could have throughout the whole week, the average, score would still be in the yellow zone. But within the workouts, the high-low method, you're going to go into the red, into the green throughout the week. Whereas with the tonnage method, you're just sort of like floating right in that yellow zone the whole time. So it's two different things. I would, again, back to the nervous system thing, I think that the tonnage one works when you're trying to work on structural adaptation. So you're just trying to make the athletes bigger, higher capillary density, more mitochondria, increase their VO2 max, like whatever those things are, or just get them structurally stronger. Cool. That tonnage model works. Right. And it's also very easy on the nervous system because the nervous system is stimulated by change. So you can have micro changes like you're just changing the weight. You can have, sort of changes where you're like, okay, we're just going to change the reps a little bit. And then you can have just massive changes where you're like changing the exercises or the tempo or the contraction type. Those, like, just depending on how big the change is, that's a bigger stimulus for the nervous system to adapt. Right. So the nervous system, it's kind of easy on the nervous system if you're just doing like the same movement, only 3 sets, 5 days a week, right? Or the same pattern, to stick with what Austin was talking about earlier. And there's not a lot of adaptation there, but we don't care about neurological adaptation at that point because it's in the off season. I just need you to put on 7 pounds of legit muscle. So just go ahead and go. Now, going into fight camp, where you need your nervous system sharp. Now, if you're training for something very specific, right? So combat sports is specific, but it's not nearly as specific as like Olympic weightlifting. Like there's very little variability there, right? You could go into a fight and it could be 20 minutes of work if you're doing a championship fight and it's all 5 rounds. I get that right? 5 minutes? 5 rounds?
25.
Yeah, 25.
25. Did I say 20? So I did the math wrong, but I knew what the thing was. Cool. So you could, they could be completely different. So if I go to the world championships or I go to just some like pickup competition, it's 6 throws. It's 3 snatches and 3 clean and jerks. We're done. Yeah. So the more specific the task, the more important the neurology is, right? So that's why you have to train for the nervous system. With what you guys do a lot of times, like what Henry was doing, so you were doing 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off for the ski erg. Okay, cool. So that's working pulling, that's working lats, that's working. He had this crazy fucking strong flexion. Like he was so powerful. It was awesome. Hashtag jealous. But you could have just put him on the bike and done the same thing. You put him on the rower, do the same thing. And depending on where you're at in the season, it doesn't fucking matter because you care about his systemic adaptation to that stimulus, not his specific adaptation, right? You want his metabolic capacity at large to get better, not his metabolic capacity for, shoulder extension and trunk flexion. You don't really care, right? Now you might think, okay, yeah, maybe I that matters, but I would argue with MMA, like having high variability, but the dose is the same on the metabolic system. Yeah. So you're going to do bike. Okay, we're going to do bike. Okay, then we're going to do the rower. Then we're going to do, this. And it's still, the dose is the same, 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off. But the movement changes all the time because, again, you don't care about the neurology at this point. You care about the structural adaptation. So that's the endocrine system and the muscular system, right? So with those, again, they're dumb. They don't need a lot of variability. They just are responding to fatigue, time under tension, all that kind of stuff. The nervous system needs high variability because it is at its best when it's adapting to something.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Let's talk about nasal breathing a little bit. I want to pivot, and I also want to talk about your functional capacity work because I use that a lot. That was one of the biggest things I ever got from you was functional capacity work and understanding the difference between capacities. So let's tie them both together. Nasal breathing first. What do you like about nasal breathing?
So I read the book. I can't remember if it's Breathe or Breath. I can't remember, but and it was goodish. But I read through it. I was like, okay, fine. This is interesting. And everything in that book and everything on I could look it up on Instagram. I think Brian McKenzie's part of it. I know Andy Galpin is. HHP.
Oh, look at higher human performance or something like that.
Yes, maybe that one. It seems great because I'm intrigued by it. So everything that they talk about that I'm aware of, and everything that the book talks about is the metabolic and biochemical advantages of nasal respiration. Cool. So I'm training for this kettlebell thing, and all of those are important factors. So I said, okay, I'm just going to start practicing this. And so I started I went right into it with swings, which now that I've trained people on nasal respiration, that's like almost the hardest that you can possibly do, right? It's intermittent, explosive, right? It's high force demand, high metabolic demand, high respiration rate. That's literally the hardest that you could possibly do it. So respiration rate is the most important factor for challenging nasal respiration, right? So I went right into it just stupid. I was like, hey, this isn't working. But I also do cycling. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to go out on my hour bike rides or my 2-hour bike rides, mouth closed the whole time. So just zone 2, that's the best. Zone 2, to learn it, that's the best. And so I just started practicing it. Cool. So I'm doing this. I'm doing like I had to use like tape doesn't work. So I'm doing all the weird shit. Like I'll use like a headband to keep my jaw closed at night. All the stupid shit because, I'm just all about just learning it. Cool. So I started doing it. Well, then I've got all kinds of fun back injuries. And I would say without question, my specialty is understanding trunk stabilization and all things to do with the trunk. That's kind of what I've been diving into for the better part of a quarter century now. And I noticed that I was like, well, this is weird. I'm like stabilizing for things. Now, whether I'm doing like squats or swings, it doesn't matter. I'm like, man, I'm able to stabilize, like pressurize all the way down against my pelvic floor. Okay. So intra-abdominal pressure is, of course, pressure within the abdomen, but you always want to be able to pressurize all the way down to the pelvic floor. So I was like, man, this is weird. I'm finding it easier to pressurize against my pelvic floor. You need to do that because pressurizing down against the pelvic floor is what enables you to stabilize the lower lumbar segments. So L5, L4, sacrum, that kind of stuff. If you're not pressurizing all the way down to the pelvis, you're not getting the stability in those lower segments. So then if you don't have sufficient intra-abdominal pressure in the lower segments, you're going to get hyperactivity of your spinal extensors, period. It's just neurology, right? So I was like, man, this is weird. I can feel that I can pressurize down there easier. The other thing that was really important is that I was like, it requires less effort to achieve the requisite stiffness in this case of my trunk. So I'm like, this is weird. And it's a significant reduction in the effort. So it's not like 5%. It's like, man, this is like 50% easier to stabilize, right? So I was like, man, this is really, really weird. So then I started noticing that my lower back, the lower segment, so L4, L5, and S1, kept getting less and less tight in my workouts, right? I can work harder and harder and harder and get less and less tightness. So I'm at the point now where I don't think that you can stabilize correctly with your mouth open. Just go ahead and tinker with it. Like, I unfortunately don't have, I have lots of anecdotal evidence with patients now, with athletes, and of course with myself. To the best I know, there's zero research on nasal respiration and stabilization. I don't know anyone that's talking about it. I don't know anyone that's researching it. Everyone that's talking about nasal respiration is talking about it metabolically and biochemically.
For sure.
For me, I've just found it profoundly helpful in stabilizing as efficiently as possible. So when I'm doing stuff now, anytime that I'm under load, my mouth is closed. Like, now where it gets incredibly challenging is in those rare moments. You probably get into it in fight camp when you're training a combat athlete, or certainly CrossFit does this better than anybody, where you're under load and your heart rate is really high. Think of heart rate as a proxy measurement for respiration rate, right? So for me, I know when I'm practiced with nasal respiration, I can maintain nasal respiration into my low 170s. My max heart rate's 185, right? So the max heart rate is 185. So I can literally hold that right at a little bit above 90% of max heart rate. Now, it's not easy, right? But I'm keeping my mouth closed. When I'm not practiced in it, it goes down into the 160s and even the 150s. So I've actually added in after I'm training. So I'm going to do some today, although this is not necessarily like, it's interesting and fun, but it's not the same as training. I'm doing now 2 or 3 days a week, 20 minutes zone three, where I'm doing my nasal respiration. For me, zone 3 is going to be 132 to 154. So by adding that in over the last couple of weeks, I now find that it's easier and easier and easier. So when I start getting to that panic level, I was like, okay, open your mouth. Now I'm in the 160s again. Before I was in the 150s, and I was just like, oh man, where you get that need where you want to open up. There's a little bit of a panic. It's almost like you're kind of drowning when your mouth is closed, and the athlete starts to panic, or I start to panic, and then I look at my heart rate, and I'm like, fuck, it's like 158. It's 154. Like, I need to get practice again. So now I'm back on zone 2 training or zone 3 training after the workout, because at that point my heart rate's elevated. So it's easier to keep my heart rate in a range where I can then train nasal respiration. The reason I'm doing this is the greater the amount of time that you can spend with your mouth closed and nasal respiration, the higher your movement quality. So if I can't keep my mouth closed with my heart rate above 130, I'm automatically going to be using what I call that extension compression stabilizing strategy. So if I'm hinging, my lower back is going to turn on, right? And I'm well aware that you can hop on, YouTube and find a million weightlifters with their mouth open and their head cranked back. But there's something here that I like. It's enough that I added it into my mastering trunk stability class. So I have a whole section on nasal breathing. How do you train it? What are the stressors for it? What's the value of it? The problem is I really feel like we are way ahead of the curve here because there's not even anyone trying to research this to the best of my knowledge, right? So, I mean, and I've even talked to, like, sort of interacted with the human performance guys, and I don't know if they're doing anything with this, and they have great stuff that's coming out. So for me, the value of it has to do with the efficiency of my stabilization. The more efficiently you're going to stabilize, the higher the quality of your movements. And with me, I have this very sort of fragile back, so I'm kind of like a canary in the coal mine. Like most people that have perfectly healthy discs and spine, they can't tell the difference. They just don't know. I can tell the difference. But if I can tell the difference, it's still going to have an impact on the athlete long term, right? Because all we're trying to do is push the athlete as hard as we can without abstaining any permanent damage to their passive tissues. Okay, that's the name of the game, right? If you pull a muscle, right, unless it's a bad pull, you can heal from that. If you tear cartilage, you tear a labrum, you tear your meniscus, you will never move the same again, right? If you get surgery, you will never move the same again. That doesn't mean that you can't perform better by compensating. Like, I'm performing better than I did when I was a quote unquote athlete in some cases, but the ceiling of my potential is pulled down by the injuries I have in my back. So anytime that you have damage to passive tissues, you lower the ceiling of your potential. Okay, a little bit, right? Just a little bit. Think of it like, with snatching. Like, so I snatched 128 kilos, my best. Okay, well, if I didn't have a torn labrum on my right side, let's say that my max snatch, my potential, everything's perfect, was 140 kilos. Okay, well, I tore my labrum when I was 17 playing soccer in high school. Okay, now it's 139.8 kilos is my absolute max. Okay, well, then I herniated a disc. Okay, now it went down to 137. I heard another one. Now it goes down to 132. So whatever that is, you see, it's just all like theoretical. But the passive tissues are going to be the major factor that dictate what you can actually achieve in a perfect scenario. So the nasal respiration is so important because you maintain better movement quality. The better the movement quality, the more efficiently you can stabilize, the better you can distribute the work amongst all the tissue, and the less load on the individual passive tissues, therefore less likely to abstain permanent damage to a passive structure. So it matters long-term in the injury game. It matters short-term because now if you're not working as hard to stabilize, let's say we're back into combat sports, if I can stabilize my trunk really, really well, that means that I'm not tensing everything super hard, so I can strike harder now. So now I'm more efficient at stabilizing, and so now I can relax my muscles and tense them when necessary. So then in the short term, the performance goes up as well.
100%,
well, what's cool about that too is then we can add in right from what you're saying with the efficiency of bracing. That just makes us actually punch even harder because then we bring in McGill's research with the double pulse impulse or with the double impulse.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool stuff.
And then we can go from that. If we know how to brace as efficiently as possible and know how to turn it on as efficiently and turn it off as efficiently as possible, that's actually going to allow us to increase the speed in the float phase, which is going to develop more velocity on our punches or on any of our strikes.
Yeah, 100%. No, I mean, that's absolutely. So that's one major thing. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just going to say the efficiency, remains the end goal, and the efficiency is huge in that. And I thought that would be a good segue into the functional versus absolute capacity and how we can maximize both of those systems. Should we have this?
Yeah. So the functional capacity thing I came up with maybe 2014. And we have to kind of go in the weeds here a little bit because you have to get into the neurology of it. Now,
that's what we like.
Yeah, for sure. So DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. I suppose this is a good point for me to say that I'm going to be teaching a class at the UFC Performance Institute called DNS Strength Training 1, which is an introductory class that anybody can come to. Introduces the concept of DNS and applies it to most of the big movements. We stick to the sagittal plane. Cool.
Yeah. Let me interject real quick. It is the number one course I've taken that has influenced me in my strength training and integrating strength training with performance and understanding the entire system. So I would highly, highly recommend everybody listening try to get to this course.
Yeah, and he knows his shit, so you could listen to him. No, it's a great course. So basically the reason I came up with the course, was DNS. For those of you that aren't, into this, it's basically just a comprehensive explanation of movement and function, right? So that appreciates the full complexity of neurology. Great. So I was taking this as a clinician and being like, God damn, this is amazingly influential to performance, to assessment, to changing the prescription is going to be different. The cueing that I'm doing, the technique I'm trying to achieve was completely revolutionized by my understanding of DNS. Cool. But it's a rehab system, right? Now it's, broadly, it's an explanation of movement and function, right? Cool. But it was created by Pavel Kolaj, who's a physical therapist, physiotherapist over in the Czech Republic. Cool. So most of what he's doing is with injured people. That's different than applying it to a fighter that's got to, get in a fight, get in a cage in 5 weeks, right? And so the intensity of what you're doing metabolically, aerobically, in terms of contraction, they're going to be different. But the actual principles still apply. So I went in there and was going to do a presentation on squat application of DNS to strength training. Cool. So I went in there. I was like, look, just doing 3-month position, we call it, which is triple flexion position, laying on your back, hips, knees, and ankles flex 90 degrees, and working on your breathing stabilization stuff is not going to cut it when you want someone to be able to strike super hard or squat triple body weight, right? For sure, those patterns work, and in some way, that position is valuable for the athlete, but there is a huge gap between laying on your back and holding your legs up and breathing and trying to stiffen your spine sufficiently enough to squat 1,000 pounds. Huge gap. So when I was doing this, I'm of course super nervous because I have to do this presentation in front of Pavel Kolaj and all of the Czech therapists, right? Who I respect tremendously, right? So I'm all nervous. Like I'm the only meathead on the team, and I have to go in there and do this. Like I think 2015. And so I realized when I was trying to think, how do you apply these principles? The gap or the gap was filled by this functional capacity thing. So in DNS, and I wholeheartedly believe this, we as humans have evolved to move a certain way, right? So there's a certain synergy to shoulder movement, whether it's abduction or striking or whatever, that should be having synergy, meaning the muscles working in a specific way and balanced out, again, to distribute the load amongst the entire kinetic chain and reduce any individual load on the passive tissues. Cool. That's what we would call functional centration. Essentially, if you're functionally centrated, you're moving more efficiently. You're going to be able to then perform on a higher level, and you're less likely to get injured. Okay, done. So when we're doing this in DNS, we're of course trying to get the patient at this point to move and stabilize well, but we now have to, as a coach, your job is to improve their capability of maintaining those movement patterns in whichever environment their sport demands. Hence the functional capacity. So when you're born, again, sorry, this is way into the weeds. When we're born, as mammal or as humans, we have an underdeveloped or an incompletely developed nervous system. So you have muscles to which you don't have access, right? Your abdominal wall is not very active. The glutes, not very active, right? Your deep neck flexors, your scapular depressors, your serratus and your lower trap. And then as you go through development, the nervous system matures and you start acquiring the ability to use those, and then those muscles that activate later in development start integrating with the muscles that were present at birth. Okay. Now in Vladimir Yanda, who's one of like the original guys that had the neuromechanical approach to movement and function well before anyone in the US did. So this is in the 70s and the 80s, or 80s and the 90s really. So he realized that over time, patients tended to sort of gravitate towards the more what he called lower cross syndrome. So that's your hip flexors become over tight, your back becomes over tight, and then your abs become, inhibited, and so do your hip extensors. Cool. So he noticed that. That was something that he noticed in older patients. They tended to have these postures, okay? Then Kolaj came along in the 90s with Václav Vojta, who's another Czech neurologist, and they kind of realized that the muscles that are active at birth tend to be what Yonda called tonic muscles, the ones that tend towards hypertonicity, right? Your spinal extensors, your hip flexors in this case, and your upper traps, your pecs, those kind of things. And the muscles that activate later in development tend to be the muscles that tend towards inhibition, your abdominal wall, your glutes, scapular depressors, deep neck flexors, foot intrinsics, like the list goes on. So you had Yonda that just appreciated the trend. Then you had Vojta and Kolaj that realized that this is tied into developmental kinesiology. And then when I was trying to explain how to apply DNS to strength training, I realized that there is in an optimal system, you have the tonic and phasic muscles. This is Yonda terms. Tonic are the ones that tend towards hypertonicity. Phasic are the ones that tend towards inhibition. Tonic muscles are active at birth. Phasic muscles are activated later in development. In a functionally centrated athlete that's moving well, where the movement quality is really, really good, balance, co-activation, all that stuff, those two muscle groups are integrated together. And that's how you get balance, co-activation, optimal, like what I call joint position management for optimal performance. Yay. Well, what I realized is that the muscles that are activated later in life, right, in development, they're more neurologically fragile than the muscles that are active at birth. Okay. So we don't need time in the biggest sense, like Yonda noticed it, for those patterns to express themselves. Like, okay, take a 65-year-old guy. Oh yeah, his back's going to be a little bit tighter, his hip flexors are going to be tighter, and his abs and his glutes are going to be weaker. We can actually accelerate that process within the course of a workout, within the course of a set, within the course of a rep. You can push an athlete to go from a pattern that's optimal, balance, co-activation, to one that's overloading the tonic muscles, and you drive them into inhibiting the phasic muscles, right? So to talk about like an example, you're squatting, and I can have someone, let's say they can squat perfectly. And by perfectly, I don't just mean macroscopic orientation. I mean like muscle synergy, all that kind of stuff. Okay, 135, no problem. 225, no problem. 315, it's hard, but they can still do it. But then you go up to 405, and now they can no longer execute that movement with the balance co-activation. And what happens is the phasic muscles become inhibited because they're more neurologically fragile than the tonic muscles. And then they execute the movement with a tonic posture as opposed to one that integrates the phasic and the tonic muscles. So the functional capacity is the top end of the range, or the functional threshold is the top end of the range where they can move and stabilize with those optimal movement strategies with a functionally centrated joint, right? To use the DNS term. Well, there's three, really kind of four strains or stressors that you can apply to the nervous system that can push them over that capacity. There's load, duration, speed, and now I've added movement complexity. Okay. So, and these are all neurological. This is not mechanical. This is not metabolic, right? This is neurological stress and strain. So if you take an athlete and you have them, let's say we're doing kettlebell swings, right? And let's say that you've got a guy and you've just decided that like, all right, I just need to get them really, really good at 30-second metabolic intervals, posterior chain stuff. Cool, let's just do swings. We're going to do alternating single arm swings, 30 seconds on, 90 seconds off for 10 rounds, right? Whatever. Well, when they do that in the beginning, let's stick with two arms. So we do that because I think people are doing two arms more so they can sort of feel this in their head. You're doing it, and let's say the first round, you're getting 38 swings in. Okay, cool. So you get 30 at and everything's perfect. You do the next one. Okay, let's just say you're in really good shape. Everything's perfect. The third round now you're starting to get a little bit tired. And so if you want to keep going, the phasic muscles are going to become inhibited first. They're going to fatigue quicker. Again, it's a neurological fatigue. It's not a metabolic fatigue, right? It's not like they're lacking ATP at this point or lacking glucose or whatever. Neurologically, by pushing them there, the abs will start to turn off, the hip extensors start to turn off, and then your spinal extensors will start to slowly turn on, and the hip flexors, and then you're going to gravitate into that extension, compression, stabilizing strategy over time. So you can take someone, and by having them do sustained output for a longer duration, the phasic muscles will fatigue faster. And once you go over capacity, if you want to keep doing that movement, you're going to do so with decentrated joints or with less efficient movement quality. You could do the same thing with load that I just described with the squats. They're totally good up through 225 or 315. Anything over 315, they're going to have to use that extension, compression, stabilizing strategy to execute it. Okay. The last one is speed. So, I think the best example of this is sort of a loaded one because there's lots of factors that go into it, is non-contact ACL injuries. So somebody comes down off of a rebound, nobody touches them, they land, their knee goes into valgus, blows their knee out. Now, I know their Q angle and where they're at with their menstruation cycle or whatever are all factors on it. But another factor is there is a tremendous amount of speed of the contraction. So being able to coordinate the coactivation of all the muscles from the foot all the way up into the trunk to control valgosity there is very, very fast. And if you go over that speed threshold, they're going to collapse into a position where your abductors aren't going to do their job, and your adductors, which pull you more into valgus, are going to become hyperactive. So not only do you have gravity pushing the knee into valgus, now you have the own body pulling the knee into valgus because you're moving too quickly. Right? So load, speed, and duration. The other one that I add in there is just movement complexity because it's a thing, right, that will drive them into those patterns, right? So with those, when you're thinking about those three stressors to the nervous system, and we want to preserve the passive tissues for maximum longevity and maximum performance, that means that we want to make sure that they're performing really, really well and moving really, really well. So you can't just, back to the dose thing, you have to think at what point do they lose movement quality? And is that an issue of load, speed, or duration? And then you can dose it differently based on the athlete. What are the demands of the sport, right? Or where are they at in the season? So then if they have a problem with their movement quality, and you might just notice it like, someone's form just goes to shit after they've been, doing metabolic work for like, say, 4 minutes, then their movement goes to shit. Well, that might be a capacity thing. So now you have to have someone where you're going to dose it in a way that's right at their threshold, and you're going to do repeated effort with rest, where you're just like pushing them to that threshold, hanging out there, rest, do it again, do it again, do it again. It's no different than the nasal breathing that I'm going to do here in a little bit. It's just be right at that threshold, and then you can raise their functional capacity so that you can increase the amount of time that they're moving well, right? So that is a completely different variable that I don't think coaches are considering. They're just thinking how much load is on the bar, because the only thing that they're worried about is the absolute output. So there's a gap, I call it the functional gap, between their functional capacity and their absolute max. So it's easiest to think about in a squat. Okay, you got that athlete that is able to squat 315 with good quality, but let's say that they're able to actually squat 405 with that extension compression, but that's the most that they can do. Right? Ammonia caps are out, buddy's slapping them in the face to get ready. They can get a 405 back squat, right? But if you take that same athlete and now you do some capacity work, maybe they can get to 365 without breaking their movement quality. And that what happens is your actual absolute max goes up a little bit as well. But now they're able to sort of maintain optimal movement strategies in a greater period of time. So they're moving more efficiently and they're loading their passive tissues less. That's the value of it. So for you guys, you just want to be thinking not just about, their absolute effort or their absolute max. You want to be thinking about like, okay, is there some threshold issue stuff, and do we actually need to be working on that?
Well, and what's cool is to use your term, kind of put a bow on everything. The nasal breathing that you're seeing anecdotally, obviously, is going to increase the functional capacity of the movements. From what it sounds like, you're able to maintain biomechanical efficiency at a higher rate, is what you're finding.
Yeah, so it requires less effort to stabilize well, so
Exactly.
it makes everything more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it makes
It's really
it
just about efficiency.
Yeah, and
But
it makes
that-
it a positive feedback loop.
Yeah, but that also makes it potentially a variable that more coaches should look into, because if it's not just making you increasing your aerobic capacity, dropping you away from fight or flight, all these things that we kind of know, if it's going to increase our functional capacity, that needs to be something that needs to be integrated into strength and conditioning training, because it's going to make our athletes more efficient and better through their movement or capabilities, and thus transfer into our sport training a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's just another factor that people need to be considering. Now, one thing that I always want to put a caveat on here is I'm not saying that one should only train at or below functional threshold.
Yeah.
So especially if you've got an athlete that has a large functional gap there, if I have a power lifter that comes in, some of these guys, they couldn't do a squat with 135 with a proper pattern, and maybe they squat 880, who knows?
Yeah.
So the absolute max is when you're getting the structural adaptations that we talked about earlier, right? We're increasing the tensile capacity of the muscles of the myofascial system. We're increasing contractile strength, mitochondrial density, like whatever, all the structural things that we're doing, that happens when you're stimulating way, way up at that super, super high intense area. So we need to go there, but we need to then realize that, like, okay, we got to shut these patterns off, and we need to be, spending time with better movement strategies. Okay. So depending on where they're at in their season and how badly their capacity is for whatever sport they're doing, you may have to spend more or less time. Like if you're 3 weeks out of a fight, like, fuck it, just train. Like, we're not going to like back off, because if the person has a really bad capacity, they're nowhere close to fatigue when they're training it. Nowhere close. It's like nasal respiration. When I have people doing nasal respiration in the beginning, so let's say that they have a 185 max heart rate like I do. Okay, well, they're going to go out there. They're going to get on. The easiest way to do it is just consistent cyclical work as opposed to intermittent cyclical work. What I mean is consistent or constant cyclical work would be the bike or the assault bike. Okay, right? That means it's constant output of just easy stuff, right? Then the rower is intermittent, right? The ski erg is intermittent. Double unders is intermittent. Running is intermittent, right? You're contracting, relaxing. It's better just to go out and just keep everything constant. So when they go out there, there are athletes that might have a max heart rate of 185, and if they get over 100, they can't keep their mouth closed. Okay, so if you just said, all right, you can only train where you can keep your mouth closed, but you also need to get them metabolically fit, it's never going to fucking happen. It's never going to happen. Like, so you have to push the athlete above capacity, to go back to the functional capacity and often the analogy with the nasal breathing. You have to be pushing them to that top level. The important thing is, though, you need to make sure that at the end of the day when they're training, the pattern that you are most stimulating is the optimal movement strategy and not a compensatory pattern. So that might be with the squat, you're doing things after training to make sure that you're shutting that pattern down, right? So it's a really, really important factor. It just requires, I think it's another thing for coaches to consider. And you have to be, the hardest thing, the biggest limitation with it is you have to know when the pattern is going to go bad. So I don't know how far, we're way over the time that you wanted to chat.
Oh, you're good, dude.
How do you train this, though? So I guess maybe we have to answer this question. So you basically want to find their threshold. Okay, so I'll just use an example. I had a CrossFitter in the other day. She's getting ready to go down to Wadapalooza, and she has sharp pain when she's doing GHD sit-ups. Hashtag ridiculous workout or ridiculous movement. So she's doing GHD sit-ups, and she was getting pain. She gets a pinching pain. She's actually had low back surgery, so she had a herniated disc, right? So she gets pinching pain when she does this. And I asked her, I was like, okay, cool. So we're going to do some capacity work with her. So The job and treatment is to improve the athlete's capability of moving well. The job of the coach is to improve their capacity to move well in whatever environment their sport demands. Cool. So I've obviously worked on her capability to stabilize well and to flex her spine effectively, not effectively, efficiently, with the proper movement pattern, right? That's laying on the table, ab mats in there. I'm teaching her how to kind of like pressurize into the ab mat and all that kind of stuff. Cool. And that's very, very low intensity. She's not fatigued or anything like that. We're just working on the pattern. Well, then I said, okay, go do your GHD sit-ups, and there's 3 lines that you can use to find the functional threshold. The best one is when the pattern breaks, okay? And that's it's the most precise, but it's the hardest to measure because the coach either has to see it break or the athlete has to have the body awareness to know when it breaks. So you have to talk to them like, okay, when it goes, your back will turn on, you might feel your belly kind of suck in, your ribs elevate, your shoulders will come up a little bit, and it's subtle. Well, if the athlete can't feel that, you're not with them all the time, or if you can't see it that well, it's a bad place to go. Then you've got the next one is tightness. So let's say that they've got an injury. In this case, this athlete had the back stuff. Okay, well, then when does the tightness present? Because tightness presents before pain. And then the last one that's the most precise, but the farthest away from the actual threshold is pain. Make sense? So I said, okay, go do GHD sit-ups and tell me when you can actually, when you start getting pain. And so she got pain at 42 reps, right? Which is ridiculous. Okay, cool. I couldn't do 42 of those if you paid me $1 million. But so nonetheless, she's going to go to Wodapalooza, and who knows? They might have 50, GHD sit-up buy-in. Who knows? So then I said, okay, fine. This particular athlete can't feel her body well. She doesn't even know when she really gets tight, and she definitely can't tell if she's is losing the positioning. So then I said, okay, fine. So you're going to take pain, and then we're going to drop that number way down. So instead of 42 reps, I think we started at 11 reps. And we wanted it to be repeatable, right? And I was assuming that 11 reps, right, was going to be right around her functional capacity. Because remember, pain is if you're in pain, you're way past your functional capacity. If it was tightness, I might have done 15 reps. And if it was actually whenever the pattern broke, I bet you it would have broken somewhere between 18 and 22. Okay. So if you're using the threshold, you can go right up to the threshold, and you're actually right below the threshold, and you're doing repeated efforts with sufficient rest. So I said, okay, Patty, you're going to do 9 GHD. It was 9 GHD sit-ups, and then you're going to rest for 90 seconds. Okay. She can do way more than that. Right. And she's just like, that's not going to tire me out. I was like, we're not doing metabolic work. We're doing functional capacity work. And so we just worked her up over time to where now, I don't know, we got her up into like 15, 16, 17 reps, and she's able to do those fine. I said, okay, go test them again. And she's just like, oh, I got to like 55 and I had no pain. Okay, we're done. Like I don't need you doing 100 GHD sit-ups, so you're done. So a little bit of functional capacity work had a massive impact on her actual performance, but that's kind of how you'd break it down. You would use pain or tightness or the actual loss of the pattern itself. If it's right where the pattern is, then you know what the threshold is. If it's tightness, you need to drop the reps lower, right, for your actual repeated effort work. And if it's pain, you need to drop them even more.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does that kind of make sense?
No, that's a phenomenal system to apply that. Yeah,
it's kind of hard because it's just another thing for coaches to think about. So I don't know. I think once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like it's all over the place. And, to me, the capacity work and the functional capacity stuff is almost more important than the individual like platform weightlifting stuff. I mean, it's just, I was working with a pro team a couple weeks ago, and they were asking me like, well, what would you do differently than what you did there? And I was like, way more like sport specific stuff, right? This was a baseball team. So, way more like med ball stuff and throwing and heavier movements that are going to like convert the power that we've developed in the weight room onto the mound or into the bat. And before I was doing a little bit of that and a ton of the, squatting and cleaning and snatching and all that kind of stuff. And so there's like, Austin, you do a ton of this already, like where they're doing lots of sort of like it's intermittent stuff. For me, 20 years ago, I would have been taking those guys and maybe I'm just emphasizing the strength of the strength and conditioning coach. Now, just to kind of close the loop on the whole conversation, I want to just keep it more simple and just realize that our job as strength conditioning coaches, is not to make them better at strength conditioning. It's to make them better at whatever they're paid to do. So, okay, so you're going to fight. Okay, I need to make you better at fighting. I don't fucking care what your back squat max is, unless I can justify how that's going to make you better at fighting.
Amen. Yeah.
And just remembering that, I mean, I can't believe I didn't think of this when I was an actual coach. It's like pretty basic. But I remember just getting like, again, into the weeds and just going like, oh yeah, cool, time under tension and total load and average weight and meh. It really is like, okay, what are we trying to get them to do? I need them to be able to be just, super explosive for 6 reps in a competition, 3 clean and jerks and 3 snatches, right? Or soccer player. I don't need them to squat, like however much weight. I would take these athletes that don't need this, and I'd get them like super strong or cleaning and stuff like that. Really, at the end of the day, you have the strength is on one part. That's the farthest away from their competition in terms of like what they're doing. Then you have the conditioning piece, and that's going to be sort of bridging the gap between the strength stuff that you're doing and the actual competition. So I would be, if I went back in and was a full-time strength conditioning coach, I would be a conditioning and strength coach where I'm emphasizing the conditioning piece and not de-emphasizing, but I certainly wouldn't be prioritizing it like I did my entire career.
No, that's significant. That's important to hear.
That's why we get along, Rich. I like it.
Well, I will be time sensitive to you guys. This was a ton of fun. I'm excited about, what you guys are doing and trying to get this rocket off the ground. So that's pretty cool. So it'll be fun to watch.
No, it'll be good. It'll be good to get everything kind of moving in the right direction. But Rich, tell everybody where the course is again, when it is, and then we'll try to get this out so that I know there's a discount right now.
Yes. So at the end of this month, I have like an early bird to get it going. And there's actually already been a pretty good amount of people registering for it. And we have 3 instructors coming in. So it's me, Mike Rentala, and then Jakub Novak, who's one of the PTs from the Czech Republic. So we have tons of instructors, and it's going to be at the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas. It's March 4th through the 6th, which is a Saturday through a Monday. And this course is really designed for anybody that works with strength movements. So there is not a conditioning piece to this so much, but we're going to go into a lot of what we talked about when we're discussing functional capacity, functional joint centration, the neurology behind that. All of that gets covered in this course because I want to get attendees able to apply the powerful principles of DNS to strength training movements. So whether you're a clinician or whether you're a strength conditioning coach, it'll kind of change how you look at the athletes. It'll probably push you more into the neuromechanical model over the structural model or the biomechanical model. And then it's just going to, you're like how you're cueing them, what you're trying to do, all of that is just kind of change a little bit. And it's going to be more consistent with what I consider, optimal movement strategies. So what we sort of describe in DNS. So the website is athlete-enhancement.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Athlete Enhancement. I'll put up a bunch of stuff there. But it's a super cool course, and I only offer it 3 times. So I do 3 times a year, and that's it. I'm the only instructor for it. So there's one in Las Vegas, there's one here in Columbus, Ohio in June, and there's one in Dallas, Texas in October, and that's it. So I'm the only one that teaches it. There's only 3 of those. There is a strength training 2. So in strength training 1, there's actually 3 classes that we're making. But 1 is really all about the sagittal plane. And that's actually the vast majority of movements we do in the gym, swings, hinging, squats, all that kind of stuff. So it's all bilateral sagittal plane movements. In strength training 2, we actually get into coronal and transverse plane and unilateral movements. So now we get to talk about, torque and torsion. We get to talk about oblique slings. We get to talk about, asymmetrical loading and what that does to the system. And we get into that there. And then the third one is all about sort of integration. And that's where we're going to really marry a lot of the DNS exercises with that and be able to assess them well and be able to dose and prescribe the right DNS exercise to get the right pattern. So then we'll get into, in the middle of a workout, you might have an athlete doing, 3-month breathing pullovers and then walking right in and doing the back squat. So we'll get into more programming stuff and we'll get into more integration stuff. But all of those are built on, like, you have to attend strength training 1 to go to 2 and vice versa and with 2 to 3.
Gotcha.
So the 2 is in Portland, Oregon. There's only 1 2 and 1 3 a year. So I'm going to release 3 next year, in 24. 2 is coming out next year, and there's only going to be 1 every time. So there's never going to be 2 or 3 strength training 2 courses. And this one's in Portland, Oregon at Portland State University. The facility's great. One of the best food towns in the country.
Heck yeah.
So that'll be really cool. And that's I think the 16th to the 19th of May. So if someone goes to that, I'll probably, the UFC Institute in March, I'll probably offer like a 72-hour discount for whoever took that class there if they want to actually take the level 2 in Portland.
Heck yeah.
Let's go. Yeah.
Nice, y'all. So,
Cool.
Dude, yeah.
I
Thank
like
you
that.
so much, Rich.
So let's do the outro. So I am Dr. Austin Shane. We got Alex Friedman, and we got
Dr. Richard Alm.
And we are out.